He's just a kid, but his voice stopped the trial. When the judge ordered him out of the room, no one expected him to say something that would shock everyone. Subscribe and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. The courtroom was silent, except for the occasional rustle of paper and the low murmur of voices between attorneys. The air felt thick with tension, the kind that pressed down on the shoulders of everyone present, making each breath heavier than the last. The judge, a stern woman in a dark blue robe, adjusted her glasses and tapped the gavel lightly against her desk, though she didn't need to. Order was already in place. The trial had been dragging on for weeks, but it was clear that today would be different. The prosecution had presented their final arguments with an air of certainty. Their lead attorney, a tall, graying man named William Kavanaugh, standing confidently before the jury. His voice carried with the practiced ease of a man who had spent decades bending the courtroom to his will. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he said, pausing to let the weight of his words settle, "the evidence before you is clear, indisputable. The fingerprints, the surveillance footage, the witness statements, they all lead to one undeniable truth. The defendant, Marcus Daniels, is guilty of murder." A murmur ran through the courtroom. Some spectators nodded, others shifted uncomfortably. The case had been heavily publicized, dividing the city. A store owner was dead, shot at close range during what was alleged to be an armed robbery. Marcus Daniels, a 23-year-old black man with no prior criminal record, had been arrested within hours of the crime. He had pleaded not guilty, claiming he had been at home, but with no alibi to support him, his word alone wasn't enough. His attorney, David Langley, sat at the defense table, his fingers drumming lightly against a stack of papers. He knew the case was slipping through his fingers. The jury had been carefully selected, but even the best selection couldn't change the deep-seated biases of a system that often turned against men like Marcus. Langley had done everything he could, challenged evidence, questioned the reliability of witnesses, pointed out gaps in the timeline. But it wasn't enough. The judge cleared her throat, drawing attention back to the front of the room. "Mr. Langley, do you have anything to add before we proceed to the verdict?" Langley hesitated. He had prepared a final statement, but it felt hollow. What more could he say that he hadn't already? He glanced at Marcus, who sat with his hands clenched into fists, his face expressionless, but his eyes burning with something between fear and defiance. Just as Langley opened his mouth to speak, a voice cut through the tense air. "Stop the trial. I know he's innocent." The words rang out with the clarity of a bell, echoing through the silent courtroom. Heads turned, the judge's eyes narrowed. A ripple of confusion spread through the room as people looked toward the source of the voice. A boy stood in the middle of the aisle, his small frame tense, his fists clenched at his sides. He couldn't have been more than 10 years old, dressed in a faded t-shirt and slightly oversized jeans. His sneakers squeaked softly against the polished floor as he shifted his weight from one foot to the other. His face was dark-skinned, his eyes wide but determined, his chest rising and falling rapidly as though he had just run into the room. A bailiff moved toward him, but the boy didn't back away. His voice was clear, unwavering. "You can't send him to prison. He didn't do it." The courtroom exploded. Gasps, whispers, the shuffle of feet as spectators craned their necks to get a better look. The judge banged her gavel sharply against the desk, calling for order, but the noise only slowly died down. Marcus Daniels had turned in his seat, staring at the boy with something akin to disbelief. Langley was already on his feet. "Your Honor, perhaps we should—" The judge's voice cut through the commotion like a knife. "Who are you?" she demanded, addressing the boy directly. For a brief moment, the child faltered. His eyes darted to the side as if he wasn't sure whether to answer. But then he straightened his back, his small hands tightening into fists again. "My name is Jaden Carter," he said, his voice quieter now but still firm. "And I know the truth." The room fell into an uneasy silence. Even Kavanaugh, the prosecutor, had paused, his confident demeanor momentarily shaken. The judge studied Jaden for a long moment, then turned to the bailiff. "Remove the boy from the courtroom." Jaden's breath hitched. Panic flashed across his face. "You can't! I have to say something. I saw—" "Now," the judge repeated, firmer this time. Before the bailiff could reach him, Jaden's voice rose again. "I saw who really did it." The tension in the room became suffocating. The murmurs stopped. All eyes were on the boy. The judge exhaled slowly, pressing her lips together. Her grip on the gavel tightened before she finally set it down. She looked at Jaden, then at Langley, then at Kavanaugh, who now appeared to be reconsidering his earlier confidence. A moment passed. Then she spoke. "Bailiff, escort the boy to my chambers. We will discuss this in private." A wave of whispers rippled through the courtroom again, but Jaden's face filled with something like relief. The bailiff, though clearly reluctant, placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder and guided him toward the door. Jaden turned once before leaving, locking eyes with Marcus. Marcus didn't say a word, but the look they exchanged carried the weight of everything that had just happened. The judge turned back to the courtroom. The court is in recess until further notice. A mixture of voices rose again as people began filing out, buzzing with speculation. Langley exhaled deeply, rubbing a hand over his face. He turned to Marcus, who was still staring at the door Jaden had exited through. "What the hell just happened?" Langley muttered. Marcus didn't answer, because for the first time since the trial had begun, he felt something he hadn't allowed himself to feel before. Hope. The judge's chambers were smaller than the courtroom, but no less intimidating. Heavy bookshelves lined the walls, filled with thick legal volumes whose spines bore the weight of the law. A large oak desk stood in the center of the room, polished and commanding, behind which Judge Meredith Caldwell sat, her sharp eyes fixed on the boy seated across from her. The bailiff stood near the door, arms crossed over his broad chest, while Jaden Carter, his small frame swallowed by the oversized leather chair, stared down at his hands, twisting his fingers together. David Langley, Marcus Daniels's attorney, sat to the boy's right, a pen poised above his legal pad. William Kavanaugh, the prosecutor, occupied the chair to his left, his expression unreadable. No cameras, no reporters, just the heavy silence of expectation. "Jaden," the judge said at last, her voice steady but not unkind. "You understand that this is a court of law and what you say here carries consequences. You're a child, but that does not mean we take your words lightly. You claim you saw something that proves Mr. Daniels is innocent. I need you to tell us exactly what you saw in as much detail as possible." Jaden swallowed hard, his eyes flicking to Langley, who gave him a reassuring nod. His throat felt dry, and his heart was beating so fast he thought they might hear it, but he took a deep breath and started to speak. "That night," he said, his voice small but steady, "I was near the store where the shooting happened. I wasn't supposed to be there. I was hiding." The judge's expression remained neutral, but Langley leaned forward slightly. Kavanaugh crossed one leg over the other, fingers tapping lightly against his knee. "Why were you hiding?" the judge asked. Jaden hesitated. He didn't want to sound weak, but he also knew he had to tell the truth. Some older kids were messing with me, chasing me, calling me names. I didn't want to fight them, so I ran. I found this old house abandoned with a basement. The window was broken and I crawled inside to get away. That's how I saw him. The air in the room shifted. Langley stopped writing. Kavanaugh's fingers stilled. The judge folded her hands together on the desk. "Saw who?" she asked carefully. Jaden's grip tightened on the arms of the chair. "The real killer." Langley sat back slightly, a flicker of something hopeful crossing his face. Kavanaugh, on the other hand, seemed to steel himself, already searching for a way to discredit the boy's words. Jaden exhaled shakily. "I was in the basement, looking out through this crack in the wall. I could see the street, the store. It wasn't Marcus Daniels, it was someone else. A tall guy wearing a black jacket with red stripes on the sleeves. He ran out of the store real fast like he was scared. He had something in his hands like a gun, but I couldn't see it real well because he kept looking around, checking if anyone saw him. Then he ran down the alley." Kavanaugh sat forward, his tone even but probing. "You're saying you saw a man in a black jacket leave the store. But how do you know Marcus Daniels wasn't also there? How do you know he didn't shoot the store owner first and this other man wasn't just running away after?" Jaden shook his head, frustration flickering in his expression. "Because I didn't hear two sets of footsteps. Only one. And it wasn't Marcus. Marcus is bigger than the guy I saw. The way he moved, it was different. He was nervous, looking over his shoulder like someone might jump out at him." Langley picked up on that detail immediately. "You're saying the real shooter was afraid?" Jaden nodded quickly. "Yeah, not like he was being chased, but like he knew what he did was bad and he didn't want to get caught." The judge's fingers tapped against the desk thoughtfully. "Jaden, did you see his face?" Jaden hesitated. "No, not really. It was dark, and he kept his head down, but I saw his jacket. It had 2 red stripes, one on each sleeve." Langley turned to Kavanaugh. "Did the prosecution recover any clothing from Marcus Daniels' residence that matches that description?" Kavanaugh didn't answer right away. He exhaled through his nose, considering his words. "No, but that doesn't prove anything. The defense is asking us to take the word of a child hiding in a basement over the hard evidence we've collected." Langley scoffed. "What hard evidence? No weapon, no clear footage, no motive beyond financial struggles. Now we have an eyewitness who saw someone else commit the crime. That is reasonable doubt, Mr. Kavanaugh." The prosecutor's jaw tightened. The judge held up a hand, silencing them both. "Jaden, is there anything else you remember? Anything at all?" Jaden thought for a long moment, then nodded. "The man looked around before he ran. He was checking the street, but he also looked right at my building, right at the basement window. I don't know if he saw me, but it felt like he did." A ripple of unease moved through the room. The judge sat back in her chair considering. "Mr. Langley, Mr. Kavanaugh, I will allow the court to review this new testimony. We will reconvene tomorrow morning, and I expect both of you to come prepared." She turned to Jaden, her expression unreadable. "Jaden, you've done something very brave today, but I need you to understand something. Your words may have consequences. Some people won't believe you. Some may not want you to talk at all. Are you sure you want to go forward with this?" Jaden's fingers clenched into fists again, his small body trembling slightly. He could feel the weight of what she was asking him. He thought about his mom, about Marcus Daniels sitting in that courtroom, about the man in the black jacket looking at the basement window. "I'm sure," he said quietly. The judge studied him for a long time before nodding. "Then I suggest you and your mother go home for the night and stay safe." The meeting was adjourned. Langley patted Jaden's shoulder as they stood to leave. Kavanaugh said nothing as he gathered his files, his mind already working to counter what had just been said. Jaden walked out of the chambers feeling taller than before, but when he stepped into the courthouse hallway and saw his mother waiting for him, worry creased deep into her face. He realized something. This wasn't over. It was just beginning. Jaden walked out of the courthouse gripping his mother's hand tightly. The hallway was buzzing with murmurs, the echo of whispered conversations bouncing off the marble walls. He could feel the weight of eyes on him, strangers watching him, some with curiosity, others with something colder, something heavier. The adults in suits, lawyers, reporters, officers, spoke in hushed voices as he passed, but he could still hear his name in their mouths. The boy, the witness, the one who might have changed everything. His mother, Nicole Carter, kept her face unreadable, but her grip on his hand was firm. She was a small woman, but there was a quiet strength in the way she moved, in the way her shoulders squared as she led him toward the exit. Jaden could feel her tension through her fingers, the way her pulse quickened every time someone turned their head toward them. Outside, the air was thick and humid, the weight of an impending storm pressing down on the city. Photographers had gathered near the courthouse steps, their cameras flashing as soon as the doors swung open. Jaden flinched at the sudden burst of light. Reporters surged forward, microphones extended, voices overlapping as they called out questions. "Jaden, how do you know Marcus Daniels is innocent? Were you pressured to testify? Do you fear retaliation?" His mother didn't break stride. She pulled Jaden closer, shielding him with her arm as she pushed through the crowd. A court officer escorted them to their car, standing by until they were safely inside. The doors slammed shut, muffling the noise outside, but Jaden could still see them through the window. People pressing forward, cameras clicking, mouths still moving even though he could no longer hear them. Nicole started the car without speaking. Her hands gripped the wheel tighter than usual, her knuckles white. They drove in silence for several blocks before she finally exhaled, long and slow. "You okay?" she asked, glancing at him briefly before turning back to the road. Jaden nodded, but he wasn't sure if it was true. His stomach was tight, a nervous knot that hadn't loosened since he spoke in the judge's chambers. He thought about the way the prosecutor had looked at him, the way Mr. Langley had scribbled notes, the way the judge's voice had changed when she asked if he was sure. He was sure, but he was also scared. The streets blurred past, buildings melting together in streaks of light and shadow. They lived in a modest apartment complex on the south side of the city, a place where the elevators were slow and the walls were thin, but it was home. When they pulled into the parking lot, Nicole scanned the area before unlocking the doors. Jaden didn't think she had ever done that before. They climbed the stairs to the third floor, the hallway dimly lit by flickering overhead bulbs. Their apartment smelled like home, like the lavender candle his mom always burned, like old books and fresh laundry. Jaden let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. His mother locked the door behind them, sliding the chain into place. She stood there for a moment, her fingers resting against the wood, before she finally turned to him. "You did the right thing," she said. Jaden nodded, but the knot in his stomach didn't ease. That night, he lay in bed staring at the ceiling. The city hummed outside. car horns and distant sirens blending into the night air. He thought about Marcus Daniels sitting in that courtroom, his hands folded, his eyes heavy with something that looked like exhaustion, but also something else, hope. Jaden rolled onto his side, pulling the blanket up to his chin. He told the truth. That had to mean something. He didn't know when he finally fell asleep, but when he woke up, it was to the sound of his mother's voice, sharp and angry. He sat up quickly, his heart hammering. The apartment was still dim, early morning light filtering through the blinds. His mother stood near the front door, her phone pressed to her ear, her expression tight. "No, I don't care who sent it," she was saying, her voice low but furious. "You think this is some kind of joke? A child's life is at stake." Jaden climbed out of bed, padding softly toward her. She turned and saw him, quickly pressing the phone to her chest. "What happened?" he asked. She hesitated, and that scared him more than anything. His mother never hesitated. Then, slowly, she lifted her free hand and pointed to the door. Jaden's breath caught. There, spray-painted in thick black letters across their front door, was a single word: liar. His stomach turned. His hands clenched into fists. He had seen words like that before, scrawled on walls in alleys, carved into desks at school, but never here, never directed at him. Nicole turned away from him, lifting the phone back to her ear. "Yes," she said, her voice colder now. "I want someone here now." The police arrived 20 minutes later. A woman in uniform stood in the hallway, notebook in hand, while another officer took photos of the graffiti. They asked the usual questions. Had they seen anyone suspicious? Had they heard anything last night? Did they have security cameras? No, no, no. Jaden sat on the couch, gripping a pillow tightly against his chest, listening as his mother answered. The officers exchanged glances, their voices calm, but their eyes saying something else. "We'll have patrols come through the area," one of them said, "but just in case, stay vigilant." Stay vigilant. Jaden knew what that meant. Be scared. After they left, Nicole sat down beside him, brushing a hand over his hair. He wanted to tell her it was okay, that he wasn't afraid, but he knew she'd see right through him. That afternoon, he went to school, but everything felt different. The whispers followed him. Kids who used to talk to him avoided his eyes. Teachers acted normal, but Jaden could see it. The hesitation, the way they glanced at him when they thought he wasn't looking. At lunch, someone knocked his tray off the table. He didn't see who. By the time he got home, he was exhausted in a way he had never felt before. That night, he heard something outside his window. A soft, deliberate scraping sound. His stomach clenched. He lay frozen, barely breathing, listening. Then a shadow moved past the glass. Jaden's heart pounded against his ribs. Slowly, carefully, he reached for his phone on the nightstand. His fingers trembled as he unlocked it, scrolling to his mother's number. The shadow moved again. Jaden swallowed hard and pressed the call button. "Mama," he whispered. "Someone's outside." He heard her footsteps immediately, then the sound of a light switch clicking on. The glow spilled into his room as his door swung open. Nicole was already dialing 911. Jaden forced himself to sit up, his pulse hammering in his ears. He kept his eyes on the window, but the shadow was gone. By the time the police arrived, there was no one outside. No footprints in the dirt. No signs of forced entry. Nothing. But Jaden knew what he had seen. That night, he didn't sleep. Because for the first time, the fear felt real. And he knew deep down that whoever was watching him Whoever wanted him to stay silent wasn't going to stop. The next morning, Jaden barely touched his breakfast. His mother sat across from him at their small kitchen table, a steaming cup of coffee in her hands, but she wasn't drinking it. She was watching him, her brow furrowed, the tension in her body as obvious as the words still scrawled across their front door. The maintenance man had promised to paint over it, but the stain of it remained, like an ugly bruise on the place they called home. Nicole hadn't spoken much since the police left the night before. She had paced the apartment well past midnight, checking the locks, peering through the curtains, making phone calls in hushed tones. Jaden had stayed awake too, lying stiff under his blanket, every creak of the building making his heart jump. He hadn't seen the shadow again, but he could still feel it, like a presence lingering just beyond his sight. Now, as he pushed his eggs around his plate, he finally spoke. "They're trying to scare me." His mother sighed and set down her cup. "I know." Jaden met her eyes, searching for reassurance, but all he saw was worry. He hated that he had put it there. "I don't care," he said, forcing his voice to be steady. "I'm not gonna stop." Nicole exhaled through her nose, rubbing her temple. "You're 10 years old, Jaden. You shouldn't have to deal with this." "But I do." His hands clenched into fists in his lap. "If I don't, Marcus goes to prison for something he didn't do." His mother looked at him for a long moment, then leaned forward, resting her elbows on the table. "Tell me exactly what you saw again. Every little detail, no matter how small." Jaden hesitated, but then he nodded and told her everything, just like he had told the judge. The man in the black jacket with the red stripes. The way he ran, looking over his shoulder, how he seemed afraid, not just guilty, but actually scared. How he had turned toward the basement window just for a second, like he knew someone was watching. When he finished, Nicole was silent, her lips pressed together in thought. Then she reached for her phone. "I'm calling Mr. Langley," she said. Jaden nodded. That afternoon, Jaden sat across from Marcus's defense attorney in a small office downtown. The law firm smelled like old books and stale coffee, and Langley's desk was covered in stacks of paperwork and case files. His laptop sat open, the screen glowing with notes that Jaden couldn't quite read. Nicole sat beside him, her posture stiff, arms crossed tightly over her chest. Langley leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "You said the man in the jacket looked scared." Jaden nodded. "Yeah, like he thought someone was going to catch him." Langley tapped his fingers against the desk. "If he was scared, that means he thought someone might recognize him." Jaden frowned. "Or that someone already did." Langley's tapping stopped. His eyes sharpened. "That's an interesting thought." Nicole shifted in her chair. "What are you thinking?" Langley turned his laptop toward them. "The police still haven't found the murder weapon. No gun, no fingerprints that directly link Marcus to the scene. The case is built on circumstantial evidence, his presence in the area, his financial struggles, the grainy surveillance footage. But if this mystery man was afraid of being caught, it means there's something we're missing. Someone else might know who he is." Jaden swallowed. "Then we need to find them." Langley glanced at Nicole as if expecting her to shut the idea down immediately, but she only exhaled through her nose. "How?" she asked. Langley turned back to Jaden. "You said you saw the man run into an alley. Do you remember what was on the other side?" Jaden thought hard, picturing the night in his head. The street, the store, the man in the jacket sprinting into the darkness. "There was a parking lot behind the buildings," he said slowly. "I think I saw a car, but I didn't get a good look. Langley typed something on his laptop. The security cameras on the store weren't clear enough to identify the suspect, but if there were any cameras in that parking lot, he trailed off, already focused on whatever he was pulling up on his screen. Jaden sat up straighter. "Can we check?" Langley nodded. "I'll make some calls." The next day, Jaden rode his bike to the alley behind the store. His mother had made him promise not to go alone, so he waited for Langley at the corner, his hands gripping the handlebars so tightly his knuckles turned white. The neighborhood felt different now, more dangerous. Every parked car, every shadow between buildings felt like something waiting to happen. When Langley arrived, they walked the alley together. It smelled like old garbage and damp concrete, and the walls were covered in faded graffiti. Jaden pointed toward the back of the lot. "He ran that way." Langley nodded, scanning the area. There was a building with a metal security door, and just above it, a small camera was mounted against the brick. He took out his phone and snapped a picture. "This is what we need." It took another day for Langley to pull favors, to push the right people for access to the footage. But when he finally called them back to his office, his voice had an edge of urgency. Jaden sat beside his mother as Langley played the video on his laptop. The footage was grainy, low quality, but Jaden recognized the alley immediately. Then a figure appeared, sprinting through the frame. "There," Langley said, pausing the video. The man in the black jacket, his face still obscured, his movements hurried and panicked. Langley pressed play again. The man reached the parking lot, stopping next to a dark-colored sedan. He glanced around once before yanking the door open and climbing inside. The car pulled away a few seconds later, disappearing into the night. Langley rewound the footage, zooming in on the vehicle. "It's not perfect, but we can get something from this. Maybe a license plate, maybe a lead on who owns the car." Jaden leaned forward. "That's him." Nicole crossed her arms. "You think the police will care?" Langley's mouth pressed into a thin line. "They'll have to." The next morning, Jaden woke to the sound of his mother arguing on the phone. He couldn't hear everything, but he caught enough. "They said it's not enough," she was saying, her voice tight with frustration. "They need more before they'll consider reopening the investigation." Jaden's stomach twisted. He had thought this would be it, that they had proof, that Marcus would go free. But it wasn't over yet. That afternoon, as he sat in his room staring at the paused frame of the video on Langley's phone, he noticed something. A sticker on the car's rear windshield. It was small, barely visible, but it looked like a logo. Jaden's heart pounded. He had seen that sticker before, and he knew exactly where to find it. Jaden sat on the floor of his room, staring at the blurry image of the car on Langley's phone. His fingers hovered over the screen, his heart pounding as he traced the barely visible sticker on the back windshield. It was small, easy to miss, but now that he had seen it, he couldn't look away. His mind raced, piecing together fragments of memory, trying to place where he had seen that logo before. It was familiar, not from the streets or television, but from real life. Somewhere close. Somewhere important. He pushed himself up and hurried into the living room where his mother was still talking on the phone. She looked up when she saw the urgency in his face, but he didn't wait for her to finish. "I know where I've seen the car," he said breathlessly. Nicole's conversation halted. She covered the mouthpiece of the phone. "What do you mean?" Jaden swallowed hard. "The sticker on the back window. I've seen it before on another car, not just anywhere, at the parking lot near my school." Nicole's expression darkened. She quickly ended the call and set her phone on the table. "Are you sure?" Jaden nodded. "Yeah, I didn't think about it before, but there's a car that parks near the back gate almost every day. It looks just like the one in the video." His mother exhaled slowly, then grabbed her keys. "Get in the car." They drove in silence, the tension thick between them. Jaden stared out the window, his hands clenched into fists in his lap. He had expected this to be over by now. They had the video. They had proof that Marcus wasn't the man who had run from that store, and yet the police had refused to act. They had told his mother there wasn't enough evidence to overturn the case, that they couldn't investigate further based on an unclear image and the word of a 10-year-old boy, but Jaden wasn't ready to stop. When they reached the school, Nicole pulled into the lot and parked at the far end, away from the handful of other cars still lingering after the last bell. Jaden scanned the area, his heart hammering. And then he saw it. The dark sedan sat near the fence, just like he remembered. From this angle, the sticker on the back windshield was clearer, a small, faded emblem of a local mechanics shop on the north side of town. "That's it," Jaden whispered. Nicole's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Stay in the car." Jaden barely managed to hold himself back as she stepped out and approached the vehicle. He watched as she circled it slowly, her expression unreadable. Then she took out her phone and snapped a picture of the license plate. She hurried back to their car, her face set with determination. "I'm calling Langley," she said. That night, Jaden lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind was spinning too fast to sleep. The license plate number had been sent to Langley, who had promised to run it through every legal avenue he could. Jaden had expected the police to act immediately, but his mother had explained that things didn't work that way. They had to be careful. He hated waiting. At some point, exhaustion took over, and he drifted into a restless sleep. But in the middle of the night, something woke him. A noise. It wasn't loud, but it was deliberate. A soft, scraping sound outside his window. His stomach clenched as he turned his head, his body frozen in place. His blinds were half open, and beyond the glass he saw movement. A shadow shifting against the dim light of the street lamp. His breath caught in his throat. He forced himself to sit up, his pulse thundering in his ears. Slowly, carefully, he reached for his phone on the nightstand. His fingers trembled as he unlocked it, scrolling to his mother's contact. The shadow moved again. Jaden swallowed hard and pressed the call button. The moment Nicole answered, he whispered, "Someone's outside." Her footsteps were immediate. Within seconds, his door swung open and she flipped on the light. The glow spilled into the room, illuminating his terrified face. She didn't hesitate. She grabbed her phone again and dialed 911. By the time the police arrived, the figure was gone. But there was something waiting on their doorstep. A single envelope, sealed and unmarked, lying in the center of the welcome mat. Nicole hesitated before picking it up. The officer standing beside her gave a nod, signaling her to open it. Her hands were steady as she tore the flap and pulled out the folded sheet of paper inside. The message was typed, simple and chilling. "Stay quiet, or next time it won't just be a warning." Nicole pressed her lips together, her grip tightening around the letter. The officer beside her exhaled through his nose. "This changes things," he muttered. They took the note into evidence. Nicole gave her statement. But that night, even with police patrols promised around their complex, Jaden didn't sleep. The next morning, Langley called. "We found the car," he said, his voice urgent. "The registered owner is Kyle Becker. Do you recognize the name?" Nicole stiffened. Should we? Langley's next words made Jaden's blood run cold. He was Alice Green's ex-boyfriend. The world tilted. Alice Green, the woman who had been murdered, the woman Marcus Daniels had been accused of killing. Kyle Becker had been dating her, and now his car was the same one from the video, the same one Jaden had seen fleeing the crime scene. The real killer had been right under their noses. Nicole gripped the phone tighter. Does this mean they'll finally listen? Langley sighed. They have no choice now. The next few days passed in a blur. The police launched an investigation into Becker, reopening the case against Marcus. The footage was analyzed, and with the license plate match, detectives were able to link the car to the crime scene. Becker's alibi fell apart under scrutiny, and, when confronted, he cracked. He confessed. Marcus Daniels was innocent. Jaden sat in the back of the courtroom as the judge dismissed the charges. He watched as Marcus stood, his hands trembling as he ran them over his face. Relief, exhaustion, disbelief all crashing over him at once. Langley clapped him on the back, whispering something to him as he guided him out. Jaden let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. It was over. Or at least this part was. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting again. Cameras flashing, microphones shoved forward, but this time Jaden didn't feel the same weight of fear. He had done what was right. He had told the truth. As he stepped out into the sunlight, his mother's hand on his shoulder, he knew that his life would never be the same. But he also knew that he had saved one. And that was enough. If you found this story interesting, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Check out more videos on the channel and share this one with others who might enjoy it.